We've looked at Mount Shasta, and we've looked at Haleakala and the Callanish stone circles and places we've all heard about. But one place that I've heard you talk about often that I'm fascinated by because I've never heard of it before is this place, which I understand is Fish Lake Valley, Nevada.
Right. Yeah. And there was although Nevada and Utah and that part of the U.S. is loaded with petroglyph sites. This is not one that I've ever seen any record of. There's no books that show the petroglyphs that I found there. It's a very unique site. I think it's an entire hierophany. And I used to live in New Mexico, and around the time period that I was living in New Mexico, I was, at that point, doing the original research on the synodic cycles. And I would be like hiking in the mountains. I would be spending a lot of time going to places that I just thought might have some cosmological significance. And so I saw this place. I mean, I didn't see this. But I saw the region when I was driving to Nevada City from New Mexico, and I saw the White Mountains in the background, and I wanted to find a nice place to camp. And I went down a dirt road, and it was in this area that you're showing the slides of, and then I just said, okay, this is the spot. Okay, this is where I want to camp. I had no idea the petroglyphs were there, and then I sensed their presence over my shoulder, turned around, and it was the beginning of this amazing journey that from 1996 until 2006, not only myself personally, but we also did school events, the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. We did camps there, spring equinox, at summer solstice, at fall equinox. I even went there a few times at winter solstice and was able to learn the ways of this site, and it's extensive and amazing. And what it felt to me is that it called me there, and it said, "Please, we need this to be worked again." And I was able to discern that it was probably used about 1,500 years ago. The Native American. Pardon?
I've heard you say that it was as if the White Mountains themselves called you into this sacred land. And so here's an image of you sitting amongst the rocks taken from, what was this, yesterday, this picture?
Well, no, this would have been sometime in the time frame in the probably about 2002, 2003, somewhere around that time, yeah.
And so you're sitting, I believe, among this stone structure here, or these kind of natural glyphs on the stones, and what can you tell me about this specific place of the Fish Lake Valley site?
Well, this is what I call the command, the central command center. I mean, this is the main site. I'll call it the main site. And there's a seat, actually a lot of seats, but there's a main seat that you showed me sitting at that looks out toward the south over the entire area. That's me sitting on the seat. Over to the right are the White Mountains, and this is looking toward the south. And anyway, that whole area is just loaded with cosmological petroglyphs. There's one that I've talked to you about before that is a stylized rendition of the Great Bear, kind of like the Zuni bear fetish, right here. Yeah, that one there, and it actually, if you're standing in front of this whole area and notice where it's pointed in the sky, it's actually pointing to where north was 1,500 years ago. Due to precession, during the tilt and the wobble of the axis of the Earth, it shifts north over a period of time. But this particular this is very much like the Great Bear, if you look at it. And others that have been there, we've spent a lot of time with these petroglyphs, and there seems to be like a matrix of a way of actually determining the precessional cycle.
And so knowing this image of the constellation on the ground, knowing about the precessional cycle, it allows you to contemplate kind of what time of Earth that this was constructed and these glyphs were brought forth. And so there's one glyph on these stones that I'm very interested in, right here by the bear, the great bear. And it's this kind of winged serpent-looking glyph here. Could you tell me about that?
Yes. Well, if you go back to the shot of me sitting on the command seat, there's in the sky is a glyph of a petroglyph that I found in New Mexico, which is to me a clan totem, a clan symbol. I saw it at a site that I found in New Mexico. And then I went to this site, and I saw something that reminded me of this, and it's this imagery of a kind of a snake-like thing underneath, and then the wings, and then a plumed head, which is you get some sense of that here, although I get there's also some damage to that particular petroglyph there. But it reminded me of the exact same thing. And in all honesty, I've looked at so many different books of petroglyphs from America, and also even South Africa, and in the Sahara Desert, other places, and I've never seen this petroglyph before. I mean, it seems to not show up in other places, and I think it's a clan totem of the individuals that were not owned by any tribe. They would go from place to place and do the ceremonies, create the petroglyph sites, the hierophanies, and work the mysteries of the sky and the land for the people.
And of course, the winged serpent or the plumed serpent reminds us also of Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan from the Aztec and the Mayan mysteries, respectively.
Indeed, indeed. Mm-hmm.
And so here again is this command center, as you call it, and we see this great stone on top, which is your seat up there, right? Or the one who's sitting at the command kind of central of this great working site. And
that's up near the top, yeah. So it's really a pretty big area, and there is a seat that has several different places where you align yourself on the seat, but there's other alignments all through that command center area, which we'll see as we go through here. Here's one example of where the sun is rising through an alignment with summer solstice.
What are we looking at here?
This is also sitting on the main seat in the command center. This is looking toward the west, and it's this rather unique and creative way of tracking both the sun and the moon at the same time. There's all these different lines there that mark, I think there's like 28, 29 of them. And then it's divided up so you can actually watch the sun set over the course of a year, and then you can actually, over the course of a month, see the moon. Do everything that the sun does in a year in 1 month. And from that seat, you can line everything up. So you have this matrix here in the front. You have the different notches in the background looking toward the west, and so each day you can watch where the moon sets, and then over a period of time you're watching where the sun sets, and it's a great way in order to just really sense into the solar and lunar cycles.
And so the notches that are tracking the month or the days of the moon
Right.
are not only a tick mark for every day, but also showing where the moon is on the horizon.
Right, back and forth, so that you'd be watching it over the course of a month, going from the winter solstice position all the way to the summer solstice position, back and forth, the moon, in the course of the month. And then if you happen to be there, as I had an opportunity to do over the course of many years, to be there at every season and to be able to watch where the sun and the moon are setting. And here's an example of looking toward where the setting of the moon was during one of the trips.
And it's a fascinating photo because it seems like that stone right in front of you, or whoever took this picture, is kind of pointed right at this full moon set on the horizon.
Right, right, and I cannot remember the exact what that date, what date that was, but here is something that this really blew our minds. Because we happened to be there in 2006, which was the most recent year of the lunar standstill, outer standstill, the extreme moon. And this happened to be the moonrise when the moon was at its northern extreme standstill. And I said, wow, I wonder whether there's anything here at this site that is marking this. And I don't know. I mean, I guess you could say it was total coincidence, but it turned out on this one moonrise day in the 19-year cycle, the moon at the northern standstill was just coming right up that ridge line, and any other day it's not coming up that ridge line.
So when you were talking about colonists, you mentioned this time in the 19-year lunar standstill cycle when the moon walks on the land, and that seems to be happening here at Fish Lake Valley as well.
It certainly does seem that way, and of course there at that latitude, at the latitude at Fish Lake Valley, the moon cannot walk on the land as far as a flat horizon. You have to be at 59 degrees north latitude for that to happen. However, the best way to simulate it would be something like this, or what the Chaco culture did at Chimney Rock, which also for the northern standstill, they would have the moon every 19 years that would come through the chimneys of rock, and they commemorated it by building kivas every 19 years to actually do the big ceremony.
So in Callanish, we have the moon walking on the land. At Chimney Rock, we have the moon rising through the chimney. And here at Fish Lake Valley, we have the moon climbing the mountain.
Yeah, yeah. And it was stunning that it just only happened on that particular day. I mean, there's no other time in the lunar cycle where it would do this.
You know, it's funny to think of it as climbing the mountain, because often that idea of the mountain climber is associated with the Aries archetype, and we know that this lunar standstill happens when the North Node is in the sign of Aries.
When it's the outer standstill, yes,
Right, and then there's an inner standstill year, which is now in this great 19-year cycle. And so the school is heading back to Fish Lake Valley this September in 2015 for an equinox cosmology class to really create this intention and ceremonial connection of the marriage of heaven to earth. And perhaps this year we'll find a interior lunar standstill alignment also from this Fish Lake.
Well, what's really incredible is that I just did this. I just looked this up last week. The very first event that the school ever did at this site was in March of 1997, and it was in order to be there for a nearly exact total eclipse of the moon, and the time when Comet Hale-Bopp was at its strongest visibility. And we had an event there in 1997, as I mentioned, March, and it was great. I mean, it was cold, but we had a great experience of the comet and the eclipse. Well, it turns out that was 19 years ago. I mean, so basically it was almost precisely the same point in the nodal cycle that September is going to be when we take the group back, when we take the school back there this September. In March, the nodes were like 28.5, 29 Virgo Pisces, and it's going to be 1 degree Libra Aries in September. So it's the exact same time period, you know. So we went there at the lunar inner standstill, and now we're coming back 19 years later at the inner standstill. I'm kind of amazed by that.
So this great cycle of the moon calls you back. And this is such a wonderful thing too. When we watch the sky as the ancients did, we know the moon has its 28-day on average sidereal trip around the zodiac, and it's 29.5-day synodic new moon to new moon period, but there's also this greater 19-year standstill period, and we're at one of these very significant moments within that periodicity, and heading to Fish Lake Valley will be a very sacred thing to connect to the energy now that won't come around for another 19 years.
Yeah, we'll be there also exactly in the middle of the eclipse season. You know, so there's on either side of the dates we're there are a lunar and solar eclipse, and then also when we're there, turns out we'll be there for the absolute closest equinox sunrise and sunset and sunrise. You know, so all those things will be happening on those dates. Not only that, but the moon at its southern inner standstill, will be for 2 nights. It'll be right there at galactic center, in addition to rising at its inner standstill extreme.
So here's another image from Fish Lake Valley. Is this also from the command center?
No, this is the western. The site is like a pretty large area, including a whole plateau. And this is the end of the plateau stretching out toward the west. And this very end of the plateau, about as far away in the site from the command seat as you can get, is where a lot of different alignments, including petroglyphs, are designed to be used with the equinox sunset. And many interesting petroglyphs like this, and then during certain days, certain time periods, the shadow and light will go across these different petroglyphs. I happened to be there many times during the equinoxes to see this. This is the very end of the western plateau, looking directly toward the White Mountains, toward the west. And there's you can see how this would only happen on the equinox sunset. Actually, you know, we were there other nights and it doesn't happen. So it was lined up in order to mark that. And I cannot explain everything on there. A part of it is an inverted horizon. I mean, they were using a style there that merges together the cosmology and the geomancy, where you have many indicators here where they will show on a petroglyph the actual land formation. Up here would be the place where the sun is actually setting at equinox at a very specific peak in the White Mountains.
And so being back this year at equinox will allow people attending this
to experience this directly. Yes.
So one thing I've heard you say about this place is that, like Callanish, it kind of requires many hands on deck, because there's these many different stations, if you will, or different places within the site where they're aligned to different parts of the great mysteries of the cosmos and the dancing planets in the heavens. Which place of Fish Lake Valley are we looking at here?
Well, if you look toward the toward the east from the relative to the command seat, there's a small area that only had a few petroglyphs, which I like to refer to as the children's area, or the place for the apprentices, or kind of the first level school, I guess you could say. It's where you start your training there, and you can see it from the command seat, but it's definitely a smaller scale than the central command seat, which is what we're looking at again here. So I call it euphemistically. I mean, it could actually be the literal truth about it. It certainly felt that way. That it's like the children's place, or for the youngest apprentices, and this particular petroglyph here is in that area, and it's different than one anywhere else in the area. What it exactly refers to precisely, I don't know, but you found something very interesting that it reminded you of.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is it kind of looks like a shield, but what really fascinated me, and though, is from the other side of the country. One of the great native creation stories of the Iroquois is when Sky Woman fell to earth, and the birds caught her, and she ended up finding a home on the back of the turtle. And many of the indigenous traditions tell us that North America is this great turtle because it's shaped like that. But you can only know that if you're looking from the sky, which brings in all sorts of interesting questions I will ask you another time. But for now, back to Earth. And this is another station in the site, right?
It's in between the western site and the Central Command seat is this area that I call the women's area. And it was actually found by a group of women that were on one of our, during one of our classes, when we had a group out there. And it's a very amazing site that is looking directly south, and there's a, if you can get a sense of it, the stones have been worked, and they're exactly the size of where you would sit on them. And individuals have looked at it and said, "Oh, yeah, it's obviously where a woman sits. You know, maybe it's a birthing stone place. Maybe it's a place where the women would go for during their moon cycle." But the place has such a female, such a feminine vibe to it, I haven't seen anything quite like it anywhere else. And so the thing that I love about this area, about this site, is that it's not that it just has every cosmological thing, you know, even the lunar standstill, you know, all the solstices and equinoxes, you know, all of that stuff, but it also has indicators of all human mysteries. Birth and death and you know, youthfulness, maturity, masculine, feminine. The place where there's even the sense of a graveyard up on the western part of the site, up on the plateau. You know, so the whole it's an entire mystery school.
And so many seats at this site, and here's another one with drumming Daniel Giamario sitting upon it.
That's such a great spot. You know, I mean, we've probably done 15 groups there, but anytime I'm in the area, I mean, I'll just go there. I try to make it there every year, whether I have a group there or not. It's just where I go to tune in. And there's a clan of wild horses that also comes into the valley sometimes. And in fact, the very first time I went out there, a wild horse greeted me when I was there.
An image of just how wide open this place is, so how much sky you're going to see from there. We see the very top of a tent in this image and some more tents here, so it seems pretty rustic, huh?
Well, it's totally just primal camping experience. I mean, there's no facilities, although fortunately there is a hot springs nearby. And so at least every day we give people an opportunity to drive over to the hot springs. And there's some there's a pool, there's the formal hot spring pool, and then there's also the spillover into a warm pond. And people have erected, you know, put certain hoses up so you can, you know, shower and wash and that kind of thing. So that's the same area right there.
And of course, best of all, very dark skies. Maybe
when we're there in September, it'll be around the time of first quarter. So
the moon sets pretty relatively young into the night, and open dark skies throughout the course of the night.
And that morning, I mean, every morning that we're there is going to be dominated by the Venus-Mars conjunction in the morning sky.
And so here are some details for the upcoming ceremony out there. The Advanced Night Sky and Cosmology event at Fish Lake Valley, September 20th to 23rd. You can learn more about this at shamanicastrology.com. And there's an events tab that will tell you about this event and the many offerings and teachings that the school brings forth, both in person out in these sites, and also some of the online teachings that are now available, and the teleclasses, and if you become a member of the school, also a monthly teaching call with Daniel Giamario and co-founder Kaylin Castell.